Hi, everyone, and welcome to Chris's Corner. This is a place where we're going to learn about the people of the Bible. So today we're going to learn about Esther and God's providence. God's providence is his protective care. Now, about this book of Esther, it is the only book in the Bible that does not mention the name God. Right. It is known to be the most secular book in the Bible. But wait a minute, because it shows how invisible God really was to these people during the exile. But we all know that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. In this book, it simply shows that God defeats the enemy and he saves his people. So let's dig in. Okay, so the story entails that the king Xerxes calls for his queen Vashti to come before him in the presence of his friends during this wonderful feast. He had a feast and he wanted to show off his wife's beauty and for her to dance and be adorned in pearls and jewels before all of his friends. So he sent his servant out to tell Queen Vashti to come and to show herself. But Queen Vashti refused. She said, no, that's not going to happen. When the word got back to the king, he was angry. He was furious because he sent out an order, whether she was the queen or a pauper. He wanted his queen to come before him to be shown before his friends. And when she refused, he knew that he had to do something because he didn't want the other men to kind of feel like that their wives would rebel against them. So he had to punish her. Not only did he punish her, but he demoted her. She was no longer the queen. So imagine this, you all. She's no longer the queen, but we're sitting here looking at a king. That king needs a queen because what? Woman was made for man. So we want to call it what? A worldwide beauty search. All of the fabulous women near and far were adorning themselves, getting ready for this banquet because they wanted to see who would be the next queen. And so a woman named Esther came before the king and she found favor with not just God, but she found favor with the king. And she became the queen. Now, let me let you know about the story of Esther and her uncle Mordecai. Uncle Mordecai, let's call him Uncle Mordecai. Uncle Mordecai was carried off into captivity with the Jewish people. And therefore, he ended up there with King Xerxes. Now, there was a evil man named Haman, but he was a very powerful man. And he was so powerful that King Xerxes had everyone that came in his presence to bow before Haman. And so Uncle Mordecai was one of those that said, no, I will not bow before Haman, because he knew how evil he was. That made Haman upset. He was fired up. And so Haman got so upset that he sneakily went to the king and bribed him to make a decree that all of the Jews would be killed on this certain day. And that was so wrong. But how many of you know that God will avenge us of our adversary? So what happened was when Uncle Mordecai heard of this decree that was made, he tore his clothes in anger and he ran to his niece Esther. He ran to Esther and he said, Esther, we've got to come up with a plan. And you know us women, we will come up with some good stuff, right? And so Esther said, I tell you what, I'm going to tell the king what the plan is. I got to tell him what's going on. And so if anybody knows the book of Esther, you cannot come before the king without him raising the golden scepter. In other words, giving you permission to come in his presence. Well, Esther said, I'm going before the king. No, I don't have papers. No, I don't have permission, but I'm going before the king because I have to save my people, which are the Jews. And so what she did was before she went, she fasted and she had her people to fast for 3 days. And at the end of those 3 days, she went before the king. No, he did not call for her. No, he did not give her permission. But when she went before the king, she found favor. He immediately raised his golden scepter and she entered into his presence and she told him the plan. And she said, something has to break. Something has to change. And so this is what happened. She called 2 feasts with evil Haman and with the king, her king. And so they came to the feast, and the first feast, she began to tell them what was going on, even though Haman already knew. She wanted to make the king aware. And so what happened was, after she talked to them, she then went back and Haman went back home, and he was furious. He was very upset. He said, I tell you what, he told his servants, he said, go and build a gallows 50 cubits high. We're going to hang that Mordecai. I'm sick of him. I can't stand him. He's already won over my daughter becoming the queen. Oh, I can't stand him. He won't even bow to me. That man has to go. So they built it, and he said, I'm going to give you the cue when we need to get him hung. And so what happened was, God was working in the back scenes. He was working backstage. He was working behind the scenes, but he seemed as if he was silent. But how many of you know that our God is not silent? And what happened was, because I'm going to bring this story on in, what happened was, when Queen Esther called for the second feast, she told her honey, I can imagine she said it like this, sweetie, there's something going on that you don't know about, but let me make you aware. And Haman was present. It was Haman, the king, and Esther. And she said, let me make you aware that someone has made a decree for the Jews to be killed. And I just want to let you know that that's me, my uncle, and my people. And he was furious. The king was upset. He said, who would do a thing like this? Who would do a thing like this? And she turned and said, your boy Haman. He was so upset. The king was furious. So what he did was, he said, go and hang Haman and his family and take all of his possessions and all of his things. How many of you know that God will avenge us of our adversary? So not only that, so many things happened after that in their honor. But not only were they saved, the people were saved, but the queen was able to convince the king that they would make that day for the Jews to be able, because it was already decreed, it was already in place for them to be killed on the day. But they said, make a new decree, king, that the Jews are able to fight the people now. When they come up to kill us, let us be able to fight back. And so they made that decree. And people, let me just let you know this, that when the fight came, the fight was on, and they won. They conquered the people. The Jews were saved. And not only that, some of the great things that came along with that is they made that a national holiday to celebrate their victory. And the Jews were saved, and nothing else could be done against them during that time. So I have you to know that it has been stated that God's protection is not so much based upon your performance. It's not. No matter, this is the way I see it. No matter how low down you start, God will have people demoted. God will have the wicked demoted so that you can be promoted. Regardless of who's against you, what ditches they dig, God will have it so they will be dug and buried in their own ditches. God will allow that. We know one thing about this, that God can move mountains. He can raise armies. He can cause victories to come without even saying a word. So even though it seemed like God was silent, he may have been silent in this book. But more than that, God is sovereign. Our God, he reigns in his providence. God bless you.